One thing I've never done, you're probably going to look at me and say, "What? I've never done a CoinJoin."
Right. I mean, everyone's aware of that.
Yeah, I've still never done one. Is that something that I should be? Should I be moving it to one wallet and then doing a CoinJoin, and from the CoinJoin to a new wallet?
I think you got to play with the tools. You got to use the tools and play with the tools and get comfortable with it. Like no one knows how to do these. So when you're talking about tracking Bitcoin, the whole thing is a probability game. So every transaction that you make in Bitcoin is on this ledger we call the blockchain. That ledger isn't saying, Matt sent Pete money. It says this address had these addresses came in on the input side. Sometimes they'll just be one address, but like we said earlier, sometimes if you need to combine them, your wallet will put multiple addresses there. And then on the outside, there's usually it either goes to one address or it goes to two. And when it goes to two, it's usually one is the payment and one is the change coming back to your wallet. Now, there are these surveillance companies, these mercenary surveillance companies. They call themselves chain analysis companies. They are surveilling all Bitcoin users. They're using the KYC information, all this identification information you provide when you use a service to basically connect these addresses to real life individual names. They'll use other external surveillance like IP addresses and stuff. If you go to websites, this is why the whole digital privacy conversation kind of comes into it. To link all those addresses to names. Once they do that, the thing is with Bitcoin, unlike something like PayPal or Venmo or Cash App, you can actually send yourself Bitcoin. So like I could just keep sending myself Bitcoin, right? The protocol allows me to do that. So their job basically is they have all these people that they already know which addresses are theirs and how much Bitcoin they own. Their job is every time a transaction is made to have a probability of did that actually switch hands? The first step is, did that actually go to someone else? And the second step is, okay, if it went to someone else, who did it go to? So when you're talking about Bitcoin privacy, the whole play of a successful Bitcoin privacy is that probability gets shattered, that they just are not able to have high probability estimations or guesses on when Bitcoin changed hands and who it changed hands to. So the core of every Bitcoin privacy conversation is that. And that's why one main thing that people talk about is, okay, avoid KYC services. If you avoid a service that you hand your full ID over to, if you just are earning Bitcoin and people are paying you Bitcoin rather than using a regulated service, and if you're just spending Bitcoin instead of selling Bitcoin at a regulated service, you remove that whole ID information from the beginning part.
Okay.
You just all of a sudden, your job is a lot easier as someone trying to use Bitcoin privately, and their job is much more difficult. Then it comes down to, okay, let's say you fucked that up already and you bought whatever Bitcoin we're talking about, you bought it from a regulated service and you gave them full ID information. Then the question is, okay, how do I break this probability? They'll always know, those surveillance companies, all their partners, governments they work with, authoritarians they work with, other corporations, anyone that information leaks to, will always know you had this much Bitcoin at this time. But if you break those probabilities going forward, they don't know necessarily what you spent it on, and they don't know how much Bitcoin you have in the future, right? If 5 years go on and you've made 2,000 transactions, and the probability of you handing it over to someone else is just that whole probability graph is broken, you're in a way better situation, right? So when we talk about CoinJoin, at its core, CoinJoin is a collaborative transaction. So instead of just your inputs being on the input side, instead of your two inputs coming in to pay those 8 sats, you really have 5 people come in with you at the same time, and on the outside 5 people go out at the same time. And all of a sudden, and those can be any numbers. I'm just using 5 as an example because that's what Whirlpool uses, which is one of the popular CoinJoin wallets. But you do that, and all of a sudden you're breaking that probability analysis, right? There's other ways to break probability analysis. There's something called PayJoin, which is another collaborative transaction where the sender and the receiver both provide an input, and then on the outside, they each get an output. And those look like a normal transaction, while the CoinJoin, because it has many participants, is pretty obvious on chain. So these things together, all of a sudden, you start breaking this probability graph. So I would say the first step is basically getting comfortable with this as a concept, getting comfortable with this.
Why is a CoinJoin obvious?
Because if I just send you a naive Bitcoin transaction, it's, a couple inputs on this side and then there's 2 on the outside. I'm paying you and I'm taking my change. Everything they use is heuristics. If I do a CoinJoin, the most common type of CoinJoin right now is, if there's like 5 of us here and we're all doing a CoinJoin, let's just say there's 2. You can do a CoinJoin with 2 people. Me and you both put in equal amounts. So on the input side, it'll be equal amounts. And on the output side, it'll be equal amounts. And you see that, you can guess it's a CoinJoin. Now, it could be someone CoinJoining with themselves. I could just put all my own inputs in. But the point is a CoinJoin type transaction happened there. And if you use other chain data, depending on how the person did it, you might be able to tell that they used their own funds rather than had different sources of funds.
Danny, is it Whirlpool that you used?
No, Wasabi.
Wasabi.
Yeah, so both Whirlpool and Wasabi, they have differences, but they both use these equal amounts. So you have equal amounts on the input side and you have equal amounts on the output side. So it's obvious on chain.
See, I think what will end up is a world of 2 Bitcoiners types generally. I'm going to be quite generic here. And you're going to encourage me to jump from one to the other. But there will be the person who acquires their Bitcoin on a KYC exchange. They use whether it's a Ledger, a Trezor, or a cold card to store that Bitcoin. And when they spend it, they will just spend. And they just probably won't do much of this. And then there's going to be the people who go down the kind of privacy rabbit hole and they start looking at all these different things and start improving things and maybe coin joining and et cetera, et cetera. But I do think there's a world where there's just a lot of people who will do things that probably you don't like keep on exchange, use custody services.
They want to
of course. But it's. I wonder if what kind of minority it is that actually go on this journey and whether these things end up becoming baked in so it makes life a lot easier for people. And how important is it? Is it important that we have 20, 30, 40% of people doing stuff like this, or does it just not matter? It's just all
it does matter. So first of all, it's a little bit too technical for this conversation, but
try me.
With Wasabi, it's there's a bunch of differences between Wasabi and Whirlpool, but with Wasabi, not all the input side are the same amounts, but on the output side, everything is the same amounts. So that's the key. The key is like on the output side, and Wasabi specifically is like a 99-person transaction. So there's 80 outputs that are all the same amount, right? Very, very obvious on chain. Anyway, the way I look at it is most people, they're going to, as Bitcoin becomes more of a standard, people are going to realize the privacy thing is important. They're going to realize, I don't want to pay someone and have them know exactly how much money I'm holding,
of course,
how much I make. And I already see that firsthand because people know that I'm aware of how a lot of this shit works. So when people pay me, they're worried about giving up information when they pay me. They're worried about that I'm going to look back on the chain and see what they do. And you know what they do? They pay me from a regulated service. They pay me from a Cash App or a Strike because it's not connected to their savings stash, even if they're self-custodying.
I didn't do that with you. Did you go and look me up?
I look everybody up after they pay me. Yeah.
Matt.
You should tell me what you found out.
Oh, go on. Sorry, you carry on.
Did you really look me up?
When did you pay me Bitcoin?
Your wedding.
Oh, yeah, I did.
You looked me up. You can tell me what you found out afterwards.
Yeah, we'll talk about that afterwards.
Going back to like the sort of start of this conversation, if you think that Bitcoin could be captured like from a regulatory standpoint, do you think that it can be a fungibility issue in terms of the people that are trying to transact privately?
Yeah. So, I mean, the concern is ultimately privacy loves company. Mm-hmm. So if we don't have that many users using Bitcoin privately, then you stand out like a sore thumb. And like, I'll be extreme about it, but if there's like 5 of us using CoinJoin, then anyone who uses CoinJoin is those 5 people. Yeah. Right? You need a group of people to basically blend in with. And on top of that, there's a separate thing here where, the reason the war on drugs wasn't successful, even though it was 40 years of criminalizing drug users, was because there were so many people that chose to just use drugs in a sovereign way without their government, right? If most people had just rolled over and, 98% of people were like, well, it's a crime. I'm not going to do it. It's too difficult for me. I can't go down to the street corner and buy some weed with cash. Weed would still be illegal in America, right? It never would have become legalized. And the key was that there was a normalization of acquiring weed privately. There was a normalization of going back against these draconian laws. In Bitcoin right now, it's the opposite. In the Bitcoin right now, the overwhelming majority of people are just like, it is what it is, just rolling over, just handing full privacy out the door to these exchanges, to these governments that are forcing the exchanges to do these things. Regulatory clarity, we need to do that. Now, I don't think that's a doom sentence. I think what happens is the pendulum will shift, everyone will get burned, and people will start to learn, right? And people will come back. But anyway, the point I was trying to make earlier is that the thing I expect, and the thing that is probably the most dangerous, is that people will realize they need privacy, but they're used to their credit cards, they're used to PayPal, they're used to Revolut, they're used to Cash App. And as a result, I call this custodial privacy. They give the privacy over to the regulated entity. So, okay, Strike knows my information. Strike knows my transactions and my balances. Potentially, Strike has to provide this information to whatever my government is if they ask for it. But I trust Strike, and as a result, I use them, and anyone I pay or anyone who pays me isn't able to see into my financial history. And that is how the majority of people will use it. Then you're introducing a centralized third party into the whole equation for the sake of privacy, and then all of a sudden you don't have that censorship resistance element to Bitcoin.
And with regards to Wasabi and Whirlpool, how do I know to trust them? Because I know there's, like, for example, I've seen arguments online with regards to, say, Samurai. Is it that you give them your XPub?
Well, so you do know what an XPub is.
I had that one just to impress you. But you do, but they take your XPub, right? So
no,
you don't want
for some users they do.
Yeah.
So,
but why did they do that, by the way?
Okay, so first of all, CoinJoin is not a custodial relationship. CoinJoin is a native Bitcoin send transaction on the network that is a collaborative transaction. So you're doing it with multiple people. CoinJoin, you're never trusting someone with your keys. They can never take your Bitcoin, spend your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Okay, you're just basically doing this group transaction with a bunch of people, but you always are keeping custody.
Where do you do it? Like, is there a tool you do it
Your
with?
wallet is doing it, right?
But what I'm saying is, where do you, like, if you want to go and do a CoinJoin?
Yeah, you press. Okay, so you open. I'm wearing my Sparrow hat. Sparrow's on computer. They use Samurai's Whirlpool protocol, right? So you open Sparrow. You basically choose which UTXOs, you choose which Bitcoin you want to go through CoinJoin. You press go into CoinJoin, and then it's hitting the internet, right? And it's waiting to see if there's other people that are also ready and waiting, and a transaction is constructed, and the wallets are going back and forth with each other and signing the transaction, and then all at once, the single transaction goes out. That is no one's actually taking custody. So you're signing a transaction that's, okay, I'm putting in one input, he's putting in one input, 5 people are each putting in one input, and then you're signing the destination addresses, and you control one of the destination addresses, but no one else knows which one you control and which one someone else controls, and you're signing it all at the same time. So it's not a custodial relationship. What you are trusting with Samurai and Wasabi is there's this aspect, and this is a very deep hole that we're going into right now, but there's this thing called Sybil attacks, which is the main thing, the main type of attack scenario that you could see in these types of collaborative transactions.
Is that where someone like Chainalysis comes in and they try and become part of it?
You think you're doing a collaborative transaction with 4 other people,
yeah,
but really those 4 other people are chain surveillance companies.
Yeah.
That's the most extreme, right?
Yeah.
Now, the way Samurai and Wasabi get around that threat is that for an attacker to do that, they're going to spend a lot of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Because they have to spend this CoinJoin fee, and as they spend the CoinJoin fee, they're going to run out of money. It's going to cost them a shit ton of money. And if you're an honest user, you keep going into CoinJoin rounds. It won't cost you nearly as much. Specifically with Samurai, the way Samurai has it set up, if you're trying to flood rounds, it's going to cost you significantly more money than if you don't flood rounds. If you're just using it like an honest user would use it. The thing is, because they're the ones taking the fee that stops the Sybil, that stops the flooding, it doesn't protect against them doing the flooding. So
Okay.
Samurai or Wasabi could be flooding the rounds
Okay.
because they're paying themselves, so it doesn't really cost them any money.
So if they're captured and we don't know,
Then they're paying themselves, and then they can de-anonymize the rounds.
okay.
Right? Now, there's another tool called Join Market that doesn't have that centralized party. It's just two people
But Join Market
interact with each other.
It's Join Market, isn't it? It's like it's a new.
No, it's older.
Is it
Join
older?
Market's
Oh,
from
is it?
like 2014.
Okay.
Or maybe 2015 now. But yeah, Join Market sacrifices convenience for more robustness, right? So it's the same trade-off model. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. So neither Whirlpool or Wasabi's implementation protects against the people running the coordinator software that is connecting the people, because they're the ones taking the fees. They're the ones protecting against Sybil attacks, and they can't protect against Sybil attacks themselves unless there's high Bitcoin mining fees. But we just haven't seen high Bitcoin mining fees because every transaction you still have to pay mining fees. But in a low fee environment, there's very little Sybil resistance from the actual parties.